We're here at the port of Ashdod in Israel, just north of the Gaza Strip, where in the early hours of May 31st, the Israeli Navy boarded a ship from the so-called Free Gaza movement. As the soldiers rappelled down from a helicopter onto the ship, they were immediately attacked with lethal weapons, steel pipes, wooden clubs, and knives. This attack on the soldiers is the most salient point of information. Yet the New York Times described the clear video evidence showing the Israeli soldiers under attack as merely supporting an Israeli claim. The Times then quoted Greta Berlin of the Free Gaza movement, calling the Israeli version a lie. By presenting the two sides with equal credibility, the Times is apparently unable to distinguish between irrefutable video evidence and a lame and defensive verbal denial. The activists had clearly prepared their weapons in advance. The ship was well stocked with smoke bombs, an array of metal pipes, wooden clubs, axes, crowbars, fire bombs and stun grenades, switchblades and combat knives. Yet BBC quoted a spokesman of the Free Gaza movement brushing off the idea that activists possessed weapons as cheap Israeli propaganda. It's interesting that the activists' weapon of choice was the slingshot, evidenced by the enormous supply of slingshots discovered on the ship. This invokes the classic David and Goliath imagery, with Palestinians as the tiny stone-throwing David against the mighty gunships of the Israeli Goliath. No matter what the facts, media outlets seem unable to shake that narrative of Israeli aggression. Case in point, Reuters distributed this news photo showing an injured Israeli soldier. The Reuters caption, however, misidentified him as a pro-Palestinian activist. Reuters automatically assumed that the victim was pro-Palestinian and Israel was the aggressor. With all this lethal weaponry, how did the media portray the activists? The New York Times ignored this little reality, quoting a spokesman for the Free Gaza movement saying the activists were not military personnel, but were rather a group of artists, intellectuals, and journalists. Let's step back and ask a more basic question. Why would the people on this ship actively initiate a high-level, violent, and lethal confrontation with the Israeli military? What did they expect would happen? It sounds suicidal. Actually, goading Israel into conflict is a primary tactic of Hamas and its cohorts. It's what prompted Hamas to fire 10,000 rockets into Israel, until finally drawing Israel into battle, which produced Palestinian casualties and a PR victory in the form of spectacular media coverage. Likewise, the flotilla ships are a win-win for the terrorists. If Israel allows the boats into Gaza, then Hamas succeeds in opening a route to import deadly weapons. Remember when Israeli troops intercepted the Karine A, a freight ship carrying 50 tons of Iranian rifles, ammunition, and missiles? On the other hand, if Israel stops the boats, then Hamas covers its bets with the knowledge that should civilians be harmed, Israel will be censured by Western journalists who can forever be counted on to report the standard line that civilian casualties are always Israel's fault. This tactic of goading an Israeli response reminds me of Rachel Corrie, the young American woman who went to Gaza to protect the tunnels used by Hamas to smuggle bombs and weapons. When Corrie challenged an Israeli bulldozer, she was accidentally crushed to death. Now, at the time, George Rishwami, director of the group that sponsored Corrie in Gaza, told the San Francisco Chronicle that placing activists in dangerous positions is good for the Palestinian cause because, quote, if some of these foreign volunteers get shot or killed, then the international media will sit up and take notice. In fact, here's one of the peace activists telling of her willingness to die and how she sees this as a win-win.
الآن نحن إما إحدى الحسنيين إما الشهادة وإما الوصول إلى غزة.
It seems to me that this willingness to be killed is really an extension of the Hamas tactic of suicide bombings. A suicide bomber says, I'm willing to sacrifice my life in order to inflict damage on the Israeli enemy. Similarly, the activists on this ship initiated a violent confrontation, knowing full well that they would likely be killed, but they were determined to damage the Israeli enemy. Unlike a suicide bomber, however, whose success is measured by the number of Israelis killed, the goal of these activists was to damage Israel in the world's eyes using the media. I call them suicide activists. Their ultimate weapon is not a bomb belt. Rather, the media is their weapon. And these activists are willing to be killed in order to use the media as the weapon to delegitimize and demonize Israel. And this week, media outlets fell for it. Hook, line, and sinker. This is Shraga Simmons in Ashdod.